Hello and welcome back to the channel where I'm going to just be providing my updated Premier League predictions based on the season so far and the remainder of the transfer window. The original video was done before any games had been played. Obviously, a certain amount of transfers had been done, but we've gone past deadline day now and a few more acquisitions have been made and we can make a little bit more of an informed decision. My original predictions will be popping up round about now, and I'm not really going to waste your time and build up too much anticipation. The updated predictions are just going to be there as the full 20 right now. Next to that, now you probably noticed some major discrepancies already from my original thoughts to my thoughts now, and I will be probably talking about those teams the most. There will be some teams that won't get much of a sentence, including my own. But we'll start with two of those actually, in the form of, first, Manchester City. Haaland's a monster. Don't really feel like I need to say much more than that. They're still obviously first in my predictions. On the flip side, Bournemouth at the bottom. Now, I'm not fully certain what went on at Bournemouth, but Scott Parker's gone for saying the team isn't Premier League level when the team isn't Premier League level. Managers of promoted teams have said vaguely the same thing in the past and managed to survive, so I can only imagine it was kind of the strength in which he said it, perhaps, along with some stuff behind the scenes. He probably essentially did the "I demand you sign a player" thing in Football Manager, or I'll walk, and the board went, well, walk then. Arguably, they were semi-gifted the win on game week 1, but they were, good in their own right in that match against Aston Villa, and then obviously lost 3 games against the teams that are probably going to be top 3 at the end of the season. That's another change. Arsenal and Spurs are swapped over, but quite frankly, that's probably going to be a race in its own right. But we'll talk about the other relegation-threatened teams first. And you may be a little bit surprised to see that my bottom 4 haven't changed at all. The one thing I will say is that Fulham, Sutton, and Forest, they are joined by Leicester, Wolves, Villa, and Everton in a sort of block that aren't that far removed. Once again, I have used worldfootball.net to predict every single game from every single game week for the remainder of the season, and this is the table that came out at the end. I'll try to remember to put the link for World Football down below so you can try it yourself maybe. But Everton downwards have less than 40 points. In fact, Everton downwards have 37 or less. Everton have 37. So there's not really a lot separating this block out. That entire block there is effectively separated by 3 wins, not even that. And the only reason why those teams are where they are is because I just think they've got that little bit more quality for the full season. Fulham and Southampton, I feel like, might have similar problems. I've been impressed with Southampton so far to a degree. They've not been obviously massively sensational, but they have been quite good. Those signings have actually turned out to be pretty good signings. They've performed well. Obviously, those young talents had huge question marks on them when they were signed, and without seeing them in action, nobody really knew which way that would have gone. It could have easily gone either way. It's kind of a similar boat to Crystal Palace last year, where they had a bunch of new signings, a bit of an overhaul, and it could have gone either way then as well, especially with a new manager. But Southampton have burned me twice before. I predicted them to go down the last 2 years, and they've had a flying start, and then January turned up, and then they free-falled. And frankly, the last 2 years they've gotten away with it because there have been other teams that have done that same thing worse. Last year they were kind of bailed out by Leeds, Everton, Burnley struggling throughout the season, so they kind of got away with that free-fall. But Southampton were effectively, if I remember rightly, the worst team in that second half of that season. So if they do it again, I don't quite know, particularly with these younger players, how the morale's going to be, how that lack of experience will factor in. And I think they could have that little bit more of a problem to try and scrape the results that just about kept them up the last few years. Fulham, as much as I've loved their start, as much as I love Mitrovic, if he takes an injury, what happens then? What happens if Mitrovic is injured? They've got a couple of wingers out at the moment as well, which is part of the reason why Dan James came in on loan. He's not really a goal-scoring legend either. If they lose Mitrovic, where do their results come from? Also importantly, Serbia are in the World Cup. That's more games for Mitrovic and more injury chance for Mitrovic. He's going to be that little bit more tired on the backside of this World Cup. January onwards, is he going to start flagging a bit more? Is he going to be injured full stop? Do they have the depth to cover all that? Do they have the depth full stop to cover all that from January onwards? Because injuries are going to be picking up, fatigue's going to be picking up. Do they have the squad depth? Don't really think so. Essentially, I'm saying the same thing now as I did in the original video. Forest, however, effectively just bought a first and second team, so that entirely relies on them gelling and coming together. Can't really talk about the signings individually because it's more of a case of seeing whether or not they'll play well together. Talked about most of the major ones in the original video. Willy Boly's a decent acquisition in central defence. Quite frankly, I can't remember the full list of ones which have been signed since the original video and which ones were talked about in the original video as well. But I think they've been pretty sensible for the most part. Some players with Premier League experience already, some players from abroad. I think they've done quite well. Brendan Loddy on loan is an insane one, by the way. The fact he's not going to be available for the next year's Football Manager is going to be marginally annoying. But if they can get them all playing well together, I think they can do it. It's the team directly above. I said I was worried about them originally, and they're the ones that probably dropped the most out of any other team, apart from Villa, I think, have dropped technically more places between the predictions. But I said in the original video, if Leicester don't sign anyone, they'll be going down the list. And they went down the list. Yeah, Leicester haven't signed anyone. Well, Leicester haven't signed anyone net, technically. Fofana went out, and they replaced him with someone with exactly the same initials, so I can only assume they'd carved those initials somewhere and had to just work around that. But Fofana's gone, Wout Faes is in, and that's it, really, for Leicester between then and now. Still haven't got a goalkeeper probably worthy of the Premier League. Sorry, Ward, but you were a backup last year to Kasper Schmeichel for a reason. It'd be a bit like Dubravka leaving Newcastle and letting Carl Darlow play the entire year. Thankfully, even though Dubravka has left Newcastle on loan, weirdly, to Man United, can we just talk about how this transfer window started with rumours of Dean Henderson from Man United being loaned to Newcastle, and it's ended with Newcastle loaning Man United a goalkeeper instead. But Dubravka is the person that Leicester should have got. Just want to put that out there. I think they're really going to struggle as a result. They've not played well really so far, and they haven't really done anything to address it. So they're 16th, and Brendan Rodgers has just come out and criticised the owners, which went well for Scott Parker. We'll see how that one pans out. Worth noting, I'm recording this on Saturday the 3rd before every other game apart from the Merseyside derby has been played. So in case Brendan Rodgers has been sat between now and the Thursday this will come out, hopefully, then never mind. Wolverhampton Wanderers, Aston Villa, kind of in a similar boat. They're not playing particularly well. Wolves are playing probably okay for the most part. I mean, they're playing well for the most part until they get in the final third, and then they can't score for save their lives. Wolves are this year's Brighton, although Wolves were last year's Brighton as well, because they kind of had the same issue for large portions of the last season as well, particularly with Jimenez out. But yeah, Wolves can't score, and that's the problem. They've made a couple of signings. We'll see if that helps them out, but I don't think they've fully settled in yet. Guedes looks good. Nunes looks good, or Nunch, probably it's pronounced. But yeah, the obviously more Portuguese players, because they didn't have enough. They seem like good players, but I wouldn't say they fixed their striking issue, that's for sure. A similar situation with Everton. Morpay is fine, and it's what they kind of needed, but he's not Calvert-Lewin level quality when Calvert-Lewin is firing. Even Calvert-Lewin isn't Calvert-Lewin quality 40% of the time. I don't really have a lot to say about Everton other than that they've sort of patched the holes quite well, and I said that in the original video. If they kind of get the right signings in, they might move up a little bit, and they have moved up a little bit. They were 16th in my original prediction with the squad they had at the start of that season. Anana seems to be a good signing. Morpay's fine for the time being. So they're up to 13th, but it's kind of 13, 14, 15, probably that kind of ballpark. Everton, Aston Villa and Wolverhampton are very largely interchangeable in my mind in this table. But we'll talk about Aston Villa, who just seem to have huge problems full stop right now. I will say, and it might be a bit controversial, Gerrard took over Aston Villa at the worst time possible. Gerrard took over an Aston Villa that was just being built up in the image of Dean Smith's mind. He was fired probably a tad prematurely, but he'd already started to make a squad in his image, in his designs, with a reasonable amount of money being thrown into it at that point. They just obviously signed those few players from the money from the Jack Grealish sale. Gerrard now has inherited that idea, brought Coutinho in. Diego Carlos went in defence and then got injured. The Diego Carlos signing was incredible though. And now he's kind of stuck in two worlds with this squad, and it's not really performing either. It's quite difficult to work out how much of that is on Gerrard and how much of that is on the players, and whether there's something fundamentally broken amongst the system with those players. And there's a lot of talk about whether Coutinho should be the starter or whether Buendia should be the starter, and then the other one becomes the game changer. Obviously, Leon Bailey came into this season with a lot of promise, and then Bailey'd it again. And I can't really talk about Aston Villa too much because for some reason they've just not really been a team I've seen too much of. But from what I have seen, they have got the players, and if they can just get them working together again. I say again, like Gerrard's record at the second half of last season wasn't fabulous either. But now he started to put in a few pieces of his own. If he can get those pieces to work, I don't think they're going to have an awful season, but they could easily get dragged into a relegation fight. Same way Wolves could easily get dragged into the relegation fight if they're not careful. And that's kind of where I stand on those teams. We'll now be a little bit more positive and talk about a few teams that have moved up. And they were teams that I predicted would move up if things worked out. Brighton and Leeds, the main two. Crystal Palace to a lesser degree. They were three teams that in my original list I said had the potential to probably go up quite dramatically in this video compared to that video. I just wasn't willing to say in the original video whether or not it was necessarily going to click, particularly for Leeds, and whether or not Brighton could find goals. Now, Brighton have found goals, just not really from strikers, which at very least does technically solve the problem, but not in the way they were probably hoping. But Kukurea did leave, and once again they reinvested that money with a very sensible replacement, with a bit of money to spare, I think, as well. But so I imagine they've got targets for maybe January to actually strengthen that squad even further. So I think they've got the potential to be top 10, comfortably top 10. I'm not quite sure they'll be pushing Europe, but they could be. I think they're in that picture. I think they're definitely in that picture. They're in that picture with West Ham and Newcastle in my mind. Now, West Ham started poorly, obviously. I still have them 8th. And I still have them 8th and Newcastle 7th for exactly the same reason I said in the original video. It's a long season. West Ham have European football. I think they'll flag towards the end. And I think they'll focus on the European competition if they're still in it. And they should still be in it. So they're still 8th for that reason. But I could easily see the likes of Brighton, Crystal Palace, Brentford even nipping past them in the end of that season as well now. But I've kept them 8th just because I felt bad, really. It's very tight, I'll be honest. Newcastle down to Brentford is separated by 5 points on this prediction table. So, but to talk about Leeds as well, there's the other major riser here. The problems they had last year were largely injury-based, and I said as much in the original video, which is why I said they were 15th with an asterisk then, and they could easily go up in this particular video, and they have done. They've played the way I kind of hoped they would play, and they put in the kind of performance that I hoped they would do. The new signings have been electric, really. Aronson seems a talent. Sinistera got off to a goal-scoring start as well. Now he's back from injury. I think Leeds will be okay this year, quite frankly. They're in the top half right now. I don't really see them staying there over the course of the season. It's a long season again, and the USA are involved in the World Cup, which obviously affects a decent amount of their players now, notably probably their key players. But they still have the issue of Bamford and his injury proneness. So for the full course of the season, I think they'll be fine, but probably that 12th to 10th block where they're not being dragged into a relegation fight this year, but also probably not fighting for Europe quite yet. I wouldn't put it past them next year, though, if they continue to build on this squad and this squad continues to perform the way they have. Brentford's another one of those ones, but I don't really need to talk about them too much because it's essentially the same as what I said originally. I think they're just being quietly good. Them and Crystal Palace are kind of just those two teams that will put in the decent performances and probably will end up mid-table without really much fuss either way, much like Leeds, really, but they're probably not really going to be involved in either fight, but they're more likely to sneak their way into the European fight than the relegation one, probably. Depending on injuries, of course, Brentford's squad depth isn't massive still, but I think both of them will just be fine mid-table still, basically. Palace have moved up a few places from the original prediction. Brentford technically have gone down one. Don't see that as a detriment to Brentford, or me thinking they're bad. It's just more the case of there are teams behind them that have gone above them, rather than they're going backwards. And that really only leaves me talking about the top 6. I will just briefly touch on Newcastle again. They are 7th purely because I think they do technically have the best technical squad. And we've seen, even with major injuries, they took it to Liverpool last game without 4 of the best players they have. And quite frankly, we're very, very unlucky to have lost that in the final minute. We're not going to talk about the injury time situation because obviously in 95% of games, that game would have ended by then. Just for some reason, that ref decided to actually add on more injury time than there were actual injuries. Still, it's a thing, it's fine. And the VAR situation with Isaac's second goal, Isaac looks as talent, by the way. I'm just going to briefly touch on that because I don't really make these videos very often, and I just want to say VAR, feet, should only be on feet. It would make the process so much quicker, so much smoother, remove so much uncertainty. You'd be no longer trying to measure people's shoulders with people's knees or whatever nonsense. It should be the line of the feet. The attackers only care where their feet are. They're only thinking where their feet are, probably. They're not thinking where are my shoulders in relation to this defender. They're thinking, where are my feet? The point of breaking the offside trap is to have better reflexes or reactions than the defenders. If you do the lines with their feet and feet only, that would make the process so much clearer, just full stop. But anyway, everyone literally would know where they're standing at that point. But top 6, It's basically the same, except I think Chelsea will be closer to Man United now. Man United have made some smart signings. It does kind of hinge on how well Anthony adapts to the Premier League, but Casemiro probably would be fine. And Casemiro is that one signing they've absolutely needed for about half a decade, at least. But I think Man United would be less adrift in 6th now than I originally had them, and I think Chelsea would probably be a lot closer to them backwards, because Chelsea haven't been impressive. I'll be honest, Chelsea haven't been impressive. Chelsea have been the Chelsea I worried they would be in the original video. I worried they'd have something lacking. Now, probably a focal point is a big problem, and it's like they tried to fix a crack with chewing gum. Aubameyang, I'm not sure that's the answer. He might just prove me wrong now, but he was let go from Arsenal for a reason, and now Chelsea have gone, you know what? That's the man to solve our problems. The man who caused Arsenal problems internally. It really goes to show the shift in power dynamics within London at the moment, that Chelsea are signing Arsenal offcuts, people that Arsenal just wanted rid of, and then Arsenal signing players from the champions. So that's the way I view it. I think Chelsea and Manchester United are actually more comfortable Europa League spots now, and that little bit more adrift of that entire top 4. I've only flipped Arsenal and Spurs. It's not a lot in it, I'll be completely honest. That 3rd, 4th is going to be a North London fight, and it's going to be a lot of pride on the stake, particularly in their derbies. Arsenal's 5 out of 5 is impressive. I mean, I'm going to say it, surely it can't continue, but you never know. And I still have Liverpool sort of recovering themselves over the course of the season. Now, got to remember that Salah isn't in the World Cup, so he'll get a rest at least. And that could be a key difference between Liverpool and other top sides. Haaland's not in the World Cup either, of course, let's not forget that. So I think a couple of key players for those top 2 teams not being in the World Cup might actually be a major more of a thing than people are possibly anticipating. But I do think Liverpool will be okay once all their injuries come back, notably obviously the midfielder injuries. Once they come back and start playing and they have a full strength squad, they'll be putting in those kind of Bournemouth-esque performances again. You know, that 9-0 was a bit of an anomaly. It was a statement performance. The Newcastle last-minute gasp winner was a bit of a statement performance as well, because they struggled to break down Newcastle in that game and they ground it out literally with the final kick. So they needed those kind of performances. The Merseyside derbies just happened and that was 0-0. They probably should have won it if not for Pickford. I probably will do some kind of England who should be going to the World Cup video nearer to that. The goalkeeper situation is vastly interesting at this point in time, because pretty much every major English goalkeeper are putting a case forward. Who'd have thought goalkeeper would be our strongest position, other than right back, of course. But in fact, there's a discussion for right back as well, based on the performances in these first 5 games. And I might be marginally biased, but I kind of feel like so far this season, Kieran Trippier has been the best English right back. Even so, I wouldn't make him first choice English right back, but I feel like he's been the best performer in that position so far in these 5 games. But that kind of exhausts all my major thoughts of what's happened in the first 5 game weeks and transfer window and how it's going to affect the season. Now, I'm intrigued to know what other people think, and feel free to leave your comments below, whether or not I've angered you or pleased you or whatever. Feel free. Obviously, if you've enjoyed this or if you've enjoyed my thoughts, like, comment, subscribe. If you're interested in other content, Football Manager or even F1 Manager, there are playlists for those in my playlist section on my channel too. On that point, I did forget to talk about this in the Fulham section, particularly when talking about who fills in to Mitrovic. They did have a youngster there who could have been, but they loaned him to Exeter City, who is my FM team right now on YouTube. And it's a lovely story. Go seek it out. Jay Stansfield to Exeter. Go check out that story because it is rather quite sweet. But yes, if you are interested in Football Manager content, then I am doing the Exeter City save. That will be back from Monday and Thursday for the continuing future, now that the F1 game has been out for that little bit longer. I apologise if you have been interested in FM content and you've not seen it of late. I hope you don't mind that I have put my focus on the brand new F1 Manager game. But both of those will be continuing in the future. A few of these videos might be popping up. I'm not doing weekly series or anything like that in regards to football, but maybe thoughts on the England football team nearer the World Cup, maybe thoughts on the World Cup in full, etc., etc. I'm sure I'm going to be doing a World Cup predictions video the same way I did Euros predictions. So the odd video like this probably will be continuing going forward, depending on my schedule, of course, because I don't know what's happening in the future. But the intention is there. I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.